straight-up guy to deal with. That comment has been made a number of times in the past few days about him being a stand-up guy, a class act, or they don't make them like him anymore. That's accurate. Thank you all for coming today. Our family appreciates it. My mother, who helped him for years as he lost his sight and mobility, is now helping us. She is strong, pragmatic, and continuing on. The day he died, when I called to speak to her, thinking I was comforting her, she comforted me. She said, "Death at a young age is a tragedy. Your father lived a good and full life, and loved and had the love of his family." Thank you, Mom. I'd like to share some memories of my dad, and ask whomever else has them to please feel free to bring them up later or at some point, but we'd like to share those stories. Father Tim, my dad was Jim, Dad, Grandpa, Grandpa Jim, Jim Sr., Jim Jr., and he just became Great-Grandpa Jim. He was also Bub, Uncle Bub, and Brother. I never knew where that came from. Even his letters home from the Army, he signed them BRO for brother. He had an older sister, Jean, and I wondered if his parents looked at her and him and said, well, he's her brother, call him brother. But that lasted his life. He had these many titles, these many names, because of the many relationships he had with people. Good, strong relationships, and how they viewed him. There are many stories to tell about my dad, and because he liked telling them often, and we enjoyed hearing them, they became part of family lore. The pumpkin with Phil Barrett and the microphone and the hose. His plane without wings at the house in Bedford blowing leaves across the neighborhood. Him catching the New York State record fish as a kid. His train journey across the country in the Army. His Italiano friend in Italy. Or the recent stories about, I watched that bridge being built, or I went out with the navigators and we picked up furniture and I got a pod. There are many, and we should share them. He was born in 1927 in the Depression in a multi-generational household. His grandfather was a close companion. They went to movies together, spent time at the train station where his grandfather was the station master. His grandfather would sneak him into the house through a basement door when my father was dirty or wet so his parents wouldn't see him. With the outbreak of World War II, my dad wanted to enlist, but another story, his father wouldn't sign the papers for this underage kid to join the Army. He goes to college, later does join the Army, completes college, learns to fly, buys a plane, meets my mother, gets married, buys a house. Another story, he tells a story about when he sold his plane, a Taylor-Craft tail dragger, and the new buyer flew away. Then he found the parts to the plane he had taken off it when he was working on it. They made it okay. Meanwhile, his career is selling seating, chairs, in New York City to movie theaters, churches, synagogues, and stadiums. More stories. Like the story he tells about when he was the only guy in the Yankee Stadium, and he had been a baseball player and a baseball fan. He couldn't resist going out to stand on the mound. Around age 40, to better his family's life, we move away from Bedford Hills, his hometown. And looking back, it's what a big decision, to leave family and friends where he was for 40 years to improve the life of his family. He buys boats and sells them, sometimes quickly. He fishes in the ocean, he puts a pool in our new house, he skis, plays tennis, and has countless friends. Many many stories about the friends he made. My mother tells them well, especially about their time on Richard Road. Please ask her about them. Maybe not today, but sometime in the future. They're great stories. He starts his own business and becomes quite successful. Another story there about leaving American seating. It's phenomenal. They travel England, Ireland, tall ships into Italy. More stories here, like taking the helm of the ship in the Straits of Messina at night. They move again and end up in Florida. And eventually they get the town they want and the neighborhood they want. But the view they want is across the street. Here's another story. And they do get the house and the view. He and my mother raised a family and built a life together. They've been married for over 66 years. But life is more than a recitation of events. When it is lived, and I'm going to use some of the words you did, when it is lived with character, honesty, generosity, humility, and joy, it is a special life. He lived these traits his whole life. In fact, I'd like to read from a letter of his. This is from Private James T. Corrigan, July 19th, 1946. Mom and Dad, things are fine here in the Army. Thanks for sending the money. You didn't need to. I have my own and hope to be able to support myself. I read that and thought, that's who he was. Someone's able to stand on his own and tell others, I'm going to be on my own okay. And this was from a 19-year-old. He also wrote to them, some of you may know the history of our family on Cape Cod, where he has gone all of his life. He wrote to the family in 1947, geez, I hope the Cape isn't getting crowded. It seems like there's a million tourists there. Something we still say to this day. He lived those characteristics as an example to us and to everyone he encountered. Of everyone I have ever known in all my life, he was the most generous and the most honest. We couldn't, my brother and sister will agree with this, we could not leave him if we were driving across town or driving across country without being asked, you need any money? He had a magic wallet. What was in the magic wallet?
$100 bills.
$100 bills. I'm going to the house yesterday looking for the stash. We don't know where they got them. They always look freshly printed. Generous. He gave away houses, businesses, and investments to his family. His influence on myself, my sister, my brother, and all of us who knew him will be never ending. It extends beyond us in time and in place. It extends to our extended family, cousins, nieces, grandnieces, nephews, step-grandchildren, step-great-grandchildren around the country, who will carry his character, because we all do. It will influence future generations. It will even influence a 5-week-old great-granddaughter that had never had a chance to meet. But in the 2 weeks he was alive and she was alive, he'd ask me every time, how's that granddaughter of yours? I hope you'll remember him, not just for my words today, but for what he was and what he meant to you. When a friend asks you about your family, or someone gives you a reassuring smile, or you do the same,